One of the changes brought forth by the 2016 collective bargaining agreement was the reduction of the minimum disabled list stay from 15 days to 10 days. At the time this seemed like a win-win. If they only faced being out 10 days rather than 15, players would be under less pressure to play through an injury. Likewise, teams would be less likely to play shorthanded while injuries were assessed. Then a funny thing happened. Teams began to use the DL as a means of cycling pitchers on and off the roster, allowing them to bring in fresh arms with greater frequency. The result? A significant increase in the amount of players used, particularly relief pitchers. Bullpenning strategies that have developed over the past couple of years have been greatly aided by a shorter DL stay. Such strategies, in turn, have contributed to a reduction in offense. Which leads to today's report from Ronald Bloom of the Associated Press. Major League Baseball has proposed going back to a 15-day disabled list and increasing the time optioned players usually must spend in the minor leagues. A person familiar with the negotiations tells the Associated Press, moves aimed at reducing the use of relief pitchers and reviving offense. The person spoke on condition of anonymity Wednesday because the plans were not publicly announced. It's a balance, I suppose. Such a thing encourage teams trying to get guys to play through injuries more than it'll help revive offense and suppress pitching dominance. I dunno. I don't suspect anyone can say they know for sure. I do know that some of the injuries for which guys have been DL'd in recent years have seemed less than ominous sounding. A lot of finger contusions, just after a couple of extra inning games and a stretch of 10 games without a day off. Sorry, I realize we have a reputation for having sharp opinions on this sort of thing, but I'm having a hard time developing one here. If I had to choose, I'd say it's worth going back to the 15-day for no other reason than to stop front offices from taking advantage of something designed to deal with injuries to gain a competitive advantage. Follow at Craig Calcaterra. We've talked all winter about how big league teams seem completely unwilling to spend money. About how it's weird that they're not spending money, given that they are enjoying all-time record revenues. About how something must be wrong with the financial incentive structure in baseball if they can realize those record revenues despite not trying very hard to improve their on-the-field product. We could try to explain it forever, I suppose, but let's take a break from that to look at two statements from MLB front offices today that simply illustrate what's going on. First up, the Tigers, who despite filling their ballpark pretty consistently for the past decade and a half, despite getting outstanding TV ratings and despite being owned by an obscenely wealthy family, has decided to take the full-blown tear-down and tank route with their rebuild. In charge of that rebuild is general manager Al Avila. Hey, Al, how long might this rebuild take? Al Avila hopes that the Tigers can start spending at the earliest in 2021. He said Chris Ilitch is on board. Hopes by then the Tigers are like the White Sox or Phillies right now and they can proceed to more competitive baseball. He believes 2021 is the best-case scenario. Jeff Reiger, at Reiger1984, January 24, 2019, we will be like the current White Sox by 2021 if everything goes right, is about as uninspiring a pitch the Tigers could possibly make. I sure hope the folks in the season ticket sales department don't work on commission, because it's gonna be bleak for a couple of years. But hey, Chris Ilitch worked hard to inherit this team from his dad, and if he needs a low payroll to keep profits up, who are we to say that's wrong? Meanwhile, in Queens, someone asked Jeff Wilpon why the Mets aren't bidding on Bryce Harper or Manny Machado. I mean, we know why the Mets aren't bidding on Bryce Harper. The Mets owners, despite being in the largest market in the game, choose to treat their team as if it's playing in Hooterville, USA. But here's what Wilpon had to say about that. Jeff Wilpon on the Mets not pursuing Harper or Machado. I don't know how many teams have two $30 million players, he said, referring to Cespedes. Mike Puma, at Night Post. Mets, January 24, 2019. Thing is, of course, that the Mets would not be paying two players $30 million even if they signed Harper or Machado, because Cespedes' salary, $29 million, is being underwritten by insurance because he just underwent major surgery. So major, in fact, that it's a good bet that the Mets will not be paying much if anything of his salary themselves for some time. The fact of the matter is that the Tigers, if they so chose, could put a more competitive team on the field than they plan to for the next 2 or 3 seasons. They have the money and could reward fans with a better on-field product, but they choose not to, and nothing is making them. The fact of the matter is that the Mets, too, despite their claims, could very well afford a superstar like Bryce Harper, and such a move could actually be the difference between making the playoffs in 2019 or not, but, again, they simply choose not to. These teams, and others, are playing games with their fans. They're coming up with silly excuses for failing to improve themselves, and they're not even trying to give plausible excuses for it anymore. And the crazy thing about it is that, if fans revolt and simply don't show up to the ballpark in retaliation, it won't matter that much for a while, for reasons we've recently discussed. This is Modern Baseball. Follow @CraigCalcaterra.